Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the event, Confronting Genocide, the Role of UK Scholars and Beyond. It's great to see so many of you that were able to join. So the aim of this event is to bring attention to the higher education sector in Palestine, what it faces in the midst of the ongoing genocidal campaign by Israel against Gaza and Palestine, and what we as scholars in the UK and beyond can potentially do to help confront the genocide, particularly in the higher education sector, which has been a specific target by Israel. So the event is organized by Scholars for Palestine UK and the Right to Education campaign at Birzeit University. And we're very lucky to have a fantastic group of scholars who will be speaking today. Speaking today are Samia al-Botmeh from Birzeit University, Mazen Masri from City University of London, Rafeef Ziadah from King's College London, and Abdel Razzaq Takriti from Rice University. So just before we start, a few housekeeping rules. So each of the speakers will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to take questions from the chat for another 45 minutes to finish in about an hour and a half. The chat will be opened up for questions, and the event is being recorded. So let's get right to it. So first, Samia al-Botmeh will be talking about the situation of the higher education sector in Palestine. Samia is an assistant professor in economics at the Faculty of Business and Economics at Birzeit University. She is also a member of the steering committee at the Right to Education campaign at Birzeit University. Samia, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Omar. Good evening, everyone. I will be speaking on the higher education sector, and I will be highlighting two particular points. The first one is the ongoing genocide in Gaza and how it actually impacted the education sector. But I will also place this entire situation in context, given that Israel has been targeting education, both school education and higher education, at various points in time, because in a way, Israel, it's a strategic, systematic policy of trying to destroy every aspect of life in Palestine. It takes now a very different scale in the Gaza Strip, but it has been actually ongoing for a long period of time. Apparently today I found out that it's the International Day of Education. So we're, the General Secretary, UN General Secretary has been saying to celebrate this day around the world, that basically the entire population of Gaza are enduring destruction at a scale and speed without parallel in recent history. So this is how the Palestinians are commemorating the International Day of Education in the Gaza Strip, by being killed, by being massacred, and of course the killing of people and destruction of buildings has been huge in the Gaza Strip. This is a picture of the Islamic University in the Gaza Strip. It was bombed in November. There are 17 higher education institutions in Gaza. This includes universities, 7 universities, and the rest are colleges. All higher education institutions in the Gaza Strip has been either destroyed or damaged. These higher education institutions, together with the West Bank, they house about 250,000 students. So in total, between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, there are 250,000 students in higher education. Both populations have been affected badly, in the sense that the war on Gaza has been, the ongoing genocide in Gaza has targeted buildings, has targeted academics, students, not just their capacity to access education, but actually their lives and their existence as people in the Gaza Strip. We also have Palestinian universities in the West Bank, have offices in the Gaza Strip. So Birzeit University's offices in the Gaza Strip were also destroyed and bombed. They are located in Al-Jala Street in Gaza. They account for 5 centers of the university: development studies, media studies, and so on. And these offices have been there since the establishment of Birzeit University more than 50 years ago. Now, the onslaught on Gaza's higher education is not, it didn't just take place since October 7th. There is a long history behind the destruction of higher education, particularly in the Gaza Strip. In 2014, in the war on Gaza in 2014, kindergartens, schools, higher education centers were destroyed again. Islamic University, certain buildings were bombed, students were murdered, and academics and scholars were also targeted. There was a rebuilding process of higher education institutions in the Gaza Strip since then, but Israel, of course, has raised the Gaza Strip, all of it, to the ground, including the education sector. The destruction of education, both in the West Bank, the targeting of institutions, educational institutions in the Gaza Strip, the assault on these educational sectors, on students and staff, has been termed as scholasticide, which basically targeting education in terms of infrastructure, in terms of academics and staff and students, both within the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, as well as for Palestinians inside Israeli universities. And I will talk a bit about the West Bank because there is a low intensity war ongoing within the West Bank, actually. At the moment, since October 7th, we've all been teaching, all Palestinian universities have been teaching online, and we cannot teach regularly because of this map. This shows a map of the West Bank, which shows the activation of movement restrictions. There is at the moment more than 690 checkpoints across the West Bank. These checkpoints basically target young people. So Palestinian university students are the main target to be arrested at checkpoints, killed, and so on. And this is why all Palestinian universities within the West Bank have switched into electronic teaching again, and it's been ongoing now for as long as the war has been ongoing, for more than 3 months. So basically, what the destruction of education in the Gaza Strip, which is part and parcel of, in a way, making life within the Gaza Strip unlivable, is a reality that had really impacted every Palestinian in the Gaza Strip, in particular school children and universities. The fact that the Gaza Strip is becoming unlivable, it means that while the genocide is ongoing, life is difficult and miserable. But actually, once the war is over, once the genocide is over, life will continue to be extremely difficult, because whatever is there to make life possible has been destroyed. Within the West Bank, Israeli military incursions, Israeli assault on education goes back to decades. Incursions into universities, closures of universities. Birzeit University was closed for 4 years and 2 months. during the first Intifada, and incursions into universities. The last incursion that took place into Birzeit University was last November, where the army actually raided the university at night and basically vandalizes the university. Students and staff, of course, are arrested and murdered on all university campuses. At the moment, we have 124 students in prisons. This is just Birzeit University, out of whom 50 are under administrative detention, which basically means that they have not been charged, and their detention is renewed every 6 months. These are the pictures of 3 of our students that have been killed. 2 of them are brothers. And, this is an ongoing process of murdering students and staff. At the moment, we have 2 colleagues, academics, in prison, and 2 staff members. One of them is one of the university guards who has been arrested actually during the raid in November. Israel particularly targets education within the West Bank and Gaza Strip because Palestinians utilize and view education as a resistance mechanism. For us, it's a way of survival, it's a way of challenging colonialism, it's a way of resisting colonialism. And despite the extremely difficult circumstances, Palestinians have managed to become the most educated population in the Middle East, at least in terms of the numbers of years of schooling, particularly women, who tend to be the highest educated, not just compared to men in Palestine, but compared to men and women in the rest of the region. So targeting education is not just targeting a service for the Palestinians. It's targeting Israel works to target a mechanism of resistance, a mechanism of survival. I just want to say a few words. I think I've talked a lot about what's happening. I just want to say a few words about solidarity and how to activate your work in terms of putting an end to this genocide, but also challenging the root cause of all of this, which is Israel's colonialism. Boycotting Israeli academia is extremely important in all aspects and ways. Challenging the European Union's, including British policies of forcing the Palestinians not to access international academia unless we are required to sign an anti-terrorist note, which basically requires from us to first define ourselves as terrorists, and then to promise that we will not engage in terrorism. So these policies are implemented in aid of Israel's colonial policies. It is very important to, in a way, challenge your representatives in parliament, decision makers. What's happening in Gaza, everyone sees it on their screens. For us in the West Bank, it's low-intensity war, but in a way, it's nothing compared to what's happening in the Gaza Strip. Yet it all aims at one thing, which is basically making life unlivable for Palestinians, whether in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. Your role is extremely important. Your solidarity is most needed at the moment to stop the genocide and end Israel's colonialism of Palestine. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Samia. Next up, we have Mazen Masri. Mazen is senior lecturer in law at City University of London, and he's a member of Scholars for Palestine UK. Mazen will be speaking on the political context of the ongoing war on Palestine. Mazen, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Samia, and thanks, Omar. So what I'm going to do is just build on what Samia has already said and try to put this systematic assault on education and the education sector in Palestine in the context of the genocidal war on Gaza and the war that's really has been going on for 75 years, waged by Israel against the Palestinians. We should always remember that this war is part of a historic and ongoing project of ethnic cleansing, fragmentation, colonialism that denies the Palestinians, the Palestinian people, their inalienable rights, including millions of Palestinians who are prevented from returning to their homelands and live outside of Palestine as refugees. And this war has always had an aspect of targeting culture and targeting education. So cultural elimination has been part and parcel of political elimination, the targeting of Palestinians as a political group. And we can see that very clearly since 1948, since the Nakba of 1948, where Palestinians were targeted as a group of people, as a collective, where they were physically either expelled, kicked out, killed, attempts to eliminate them as a people, as a political unit, but also these also included targeting of culture. So we saw that, for example, in the Nakba, with the expulsion of the Palestinians. There was destruction of urban and civic centers that were centers also of culture. And also we saw it in the looting of books, mainly private collections of people who had private libraries that were looted and ended up in the Israeli National Library. So that's kind of an example or an early example of the targeting of the Palestinians as a culture, targeting education. But we can also see this in other junctures, in other times in history. And one example is the invasion of Beirut in 1982. So the invasion of Beirut, of course, was a military engagement where half of Lebanon was almost occupied by Israel for a few months. Some of this occupation or some parts were occupied until the year 2000. But if we look at how the targeting of Palestinians, which included, of course, physical targeting and killing and bombing, but also it included bombing of organizations, cultural organizations, such as the Palestinian Research Center. So that center was targeted several times, and also its archives was stolen, was basically looted by the Israeli army. We can also see it in the looting of the Palestinian Film Archive, which was stolen by the Israeli army, and other archives that were stolen. So all of this shows that the war has cultural dimension. Now, if you look also at another period of time, the First Intifada, where basically all universities and colleges were shut down by military orders with the view of stopping teaching and stopping the gathering of people, because of course, in any gathering of people, especially young people, especially when we're talking about education and teaching and culture, that does have a political dimension. Nonetheless, teaching didn't stop. Teaching went underground, and students and professors continued to work together as social clubs or social gatherings, and education did take place. But we can see the goal of targeting Palestinian culture and education clearly. And it was, of course, an important goal for Israel as part of the political targeting of Palestinians. Similar dynamics could be seen in the Second Intifada. Samia talked about some of these dynamics that still continue today, like, for example, the access and the movement and the harassment of students and the targeting of campuses and arrest of students. All of these, of course, are manifestations of political repression, but also targeting of Palestinian education and Palestinian culture. So that's why we need to understand the attacks on universities and school and cultural institutions and archives in Gaza as one dimension of Israel's campaign against Palestinian civic and social infrastructure. So Israel's attack on Palestinian education contributes to a system of displacement and dispossession by attacking the cultural, intellectual life of the Palestinian people and by preventing them from living, thriving, studying, and teaching on their ancestral land and excluding them from free and equal participation in the international academic community. We can also think of it as part of the genocide. Now, if one of the definitions or one of the acts of genocide is adopting measures that are meant to deliberately inflict on the group conditions calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, in a world without university or in a location without university where training takes place for doctors, for example, if there's no universities, no education, no training of doctors and others in essential sectors, then that means also no hospitals or failing hospitals that are not able to support the population. They're not able to provide them the healthcare that is needed, especially in a location like Gaza. Now, if we take a look at the targeting, of course, we know that all Palestinian universities and colleges in Gaza were targeted. Some were destroyed completely. But if we look also at the human toll, we can see that at least 94 professors were killed in the bombing. They were targeted because, some of them were targeted because of their high profile, because of the knowledge that they have, and because they were also vocal advocates of the Palestinian cause. So in addition to this, we also had hundreds of teachers who were killed by the Israeli army as part of the bombing and the campaign, the genocidal campaign. If we take these two numbers together, we have thousands of years of education, thousands of years of experience, which are badly needed, especially in a place under siege like Gaza. And all of this knowledge, all of this experience, all of this education was eliminated in 3 months. That's something that takes decades to build, which of course will affect the Palestinians in Gaza, Palestinian education, Palestinian culture. In a way, it is targeting also the Palestinian future, the future of the Palestinians in Gaza, by eliminating the educational and cultural institutions. So that is why it is important for us to act now as humans, as academics, as educators, as university workers, because this targeting of universities and schools is part of an ongoing project of war, ethnic cleansing, elimination that has reached the level of genocide. It is also important to act now because the war on the Palestinians will continue. We can see it clearly in the discussions about the so-called day after plan for Gaza, in which the whole world has a say, apparently, except for the Palestinians. And we can also see it in the increasing discussion on the part of Israel and its allies on attempts or plans to re-educate Palestinians after the war in order to eliminate ideas of national liberation and struggle, essentially to transform Palestinian culture and education from a culture and education with an anti-colonial ethos, with anti-colonial foundation, into something that is friendly to Israeli colonialism, or at least a culture that does not challenge it. So that's why we need to act now. And in the I'm going to stop here, and I think Rafeef and Abed will elaborate more on how to act. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mazen. We now have Abdel Razzaq Takriti. Abdel Razzaq is Associate Professor of History and Arab American Educational Foundation Chair in Arab Studies at Rice Universities. He's also one of the organizers at the Scholars Against the War in Palestine campaign, which we will hopefully hear a bit more about now. Abed, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shehabi. And I must say, I'm the lone voice from the US, so I have quite a bit to cover there. But I want to start by picking up from where Mazen left. I want us to think about what does it mean for Palestinians to live in a place like Gaza if we manage to prevent this genocide from continuing. Let's say that this genocide does stop. All the valiant efforts of all the academics assembled here, all the citizens of conscience across the world, and of course, Palestinians everywhere who are struggling against this horror. Let's say these efforts succeed, and we're able to force the governments that are sponsoring and enabling this genocide, and I'm talking primarily here about the government of the United States, but also its puppet in Britain. Okay, and obviously now it is a puppet government. There's no question about it. I'm not just saying this polemically. Now, if we look at this situation and we are able to stop these governments, the people of Palestine will go back to a Gaza that in which their homes have been destroyed, in which their streets no longer exist, in which their children cannot go to schools because there are no schools to go to, in which there are no teachers to teach the children, and in which all the universities have been completely demolished, and in which, of course, there are no professors in these universities. It takes years and years and years to get a PhD, as everybody in this room knows, or at least most of the people in this room. It's an excruciating process. Often it's not a particularly happy one for the people involved in it. It's a tough process to create and recreate that infrastructure again, to recreate the people again, to recover from the loss of these people, to deal with the injuries. Now we are talking about 5 to 6% already in only 3 months of the population that has either been killed or severely injured. And I'm not here using the Israeli rubbishy calculations of injuries. Oh, I feel traumatized because my feelings are hurt. I'm talking about serious bodily harm. If we're talking about feelings and psychological impact, everybody is injured. We are dealing with a disaster in every sense of the term that is unprecedented, not only in Palestinian history, but in recent modern history. In recent years, we haven't seen anything like this. It's quite horrific. Now, given this reality, and when we talk about the targeting of academics and academic institutions and scholars, including students in these institutions, we're of course referring to something that is not to be disconnected from the general trend. There is a genocide unfolding. Everybody, in a sense, is targeted. The entire population of Gaza is subject to bombardment, is subject to denial of the means of life, is subject to the politics of starvation. Already there was a politics of siege on Gaza that utilized, of course, starvation, but now everybody is subjected to that. The scholasticide dimension is just an additional element that is part of this general process. And it has features, though, that are specific to it. For example, why would a military come and detonate in a purposive and clearly planned act an entire university and show that spectacle to the whole world. We have to think about this. They're actually saying and telling and sending a message to the Palestinian people primarily, everything that you've ever built, we will destroy. Every life you've ever invested in, we will destroy. Your kids, we will kill. And those that do not die now will live a life in which there is no opportunity. Education has always been about opportunity, and I don't just mean it in the economic sense. We're not talking here in that capitalist conception of education. Education is an opportunity to broaden one's horizons, to engage with the world, to learn, to gain skills through which one can serve themselves and their communities. That is part of the scholasticide that's going on. Now, from the US angle, what I can tell you, and it wouldn't be informing you something that is surprising, is that we haven't heard from a single university president about this. Everybody went on condemning October 7th, for example. Everybody made statements condemning Ukraine when it was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Every scholarly association took a stance when it came to policies that were officially sponsored. Like, for example, condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But when we have a situation where the government of the United States is intervening officially to facilitate and enable this genocide, and when they say it's just the deranged guy called Netanyahu carrying it out, or just a few of his insane genocidal ministers, no, this is a whole international setup led by the United States. It's also, of course, facilitated by people in Europe, when we have the Israeli foreign minister coming and announcing that he wants to build an island to expel Palestinians to, or that the world should build it for him, actually. And he says that in Europe, and they just reflect on this, saying it's bizarre, the proposal. That's not bizarre. It's a genocidal proposal. Can you imagine if Palestinians were to propose that Israeli settler colonists, the solution for them is to build an island for them? No, nobody would accept that, even though it's coming from an indigenous population. So the double standards are immense, but it's not just a question of double standards. It's a question of a reality we're confronting in universities. It's a question of investment in an infrastructure of genocide denial and facilitation. And our universities are complicit in that. Our academics are afraid of confronting it in a direct and open way. So, and I'm not talking here about individual academics, I'm talking about academic structure. So I'll give you an example. The structure that I'm involved in, this learned society I'm involved in, Middle East Studies Association of North America. It's a generally progressive society on this issue. Almost everybody there understands that this is a genocidal war. People are committed to the question of Palestine, but you look at the official pronouncements and statements, they're very mild, and they're not really taking on this challenge in a way that is commensurate with the horror that the Palestinian people are experiencing. You know, we have a statement here and there, and those had to be, it was like pulling teeth getting them to happen. There needed to be activism in that association for it to happen. And it's much worse in the other association that I'm involved in, which is American Historical Association. They're quick to rush to judgments about every topic. You should have seen the level of condemnation around Ukraine, for example. It's unbelievable. When it comes to, and it took them 3 days to issue a huge letter around Ukraine, and for the whole field to organize panels and to So these official structures are not acting on Palestine, but not only are they not acting on Palestine, they're either adopting a strategy of not saying anything or actually supporting the genocide by shifting the conversation. And this is part of the problem we're dealing with now. Genocide denialism now takes both direct and indirect forms in the United States. When you come and say, no, the real problem is the student movement that is protesting the genocide, that's a way actually of facilitating genocide denialism, because you're preventing those that are trying to expose the genocide and mobilize against it from doing their work. In fact, you're not only preventing them, you're punishing them for doing that. That helps genocide denialism, and by extension, it leads to furthering what is going on. Genocide denialism in this case amounts, while genocides are happening, is far more profound than genocide denialism after genocides are happening. Okay? This is not a genocide that has stopped. So therefore, it amounts to complicity. It's not just a situation where these university administrators are just engaging in historical erasure of peoples and hurting their feelings and so on based on that. No, this is actually them being complicit in what's going on. That's why we've been trying to launch campaigns. In the United States at the moment, these have taken two forms. One is defensive, and that's basically a range of mobilizations on campuses that were designed to stop the assault on students, or to try to at least provide some minimal protection to them. I can say that this effort has spread. There are hundreds of branches of different organizations, including Faculty for Justice in Palestine and other formations of that sort that have emerged that are concerned with this defense work. The results have been variable. It's important to note that it was already a step forward to see this kind of mobilization, because we've never had a mobilization on this scale when it came to Palestine. But at the same time, it's still taking defensive forms at the moment, because the level of the assault is so huge, and it is, of course, very much connected to this genocide denial and facilitation agenda that I referred to. So we have this level of work going on. Another form of work that is emerging is a campaign that I'm involved in, which is, of course, Scholars Against the War on Palestine. And that is trying to do work that is less about protecting our work on campuses and more about actually talking about what's going on in Palestine, exposing the scholasticide, and mobilizing heavily on campuses to work towards ending this genocidal madness that our people are facing. The steps that have been taken so far are limited again, and we're all failing. We're all not doing enough. Even though we're working day and night, it's never enough when this situation is unfolding. But there are days of action planned throughout February. There's in fact a week against scholasticide that will take place in the second half of February in the United States, and I think this will contribute to building movements on these campuses. There have been in the past, there was a big letter that also Scholars for Palestine in the UK was part of, and it's a big initiative that led to thousands and thousands of academics. I'm sure many in this room have signed it, calling for an immediate ceasefire at the time. The hope was that we would achieve that. But at the moment, of course, it's looking more and more unlikely. So we need to engage in a dual strategy. One, trying to achieve the short-term objectives of a ceasefire, but actually there needs to be a longer-term strategy, which has to do with full-on liberation in the future. And I think moments like this type of, call it whatever you want, a Vietnam moment, a Soweto moment, whatever moment, a moment like this where the coloniality of the situation is so clear that it can only be denied by people who have animus towards the Palestinian people. Okay, if you have animus towards the Palestinian people, you can deny it. If you don't, if you're just a normal human being, you cannot deny it. So in situations like this, we have an opportunity to create an infrastructure for long-term liberation. I think we need to get involved and make use of that opportunity. I know that in the UK you have formations emerging, and I know that Rafeef will talk about them, but in the US, that's what we've been trying to do, to mobilize, organize for both the short term and the long term, because that's the only way forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Abid. Now we have Rafeef Ziadah, who will be speaking about the higher education sector and organizing in the UK. Rafeef Ziadah, Senior Lecturer in Politics and Public Policy at King's College London, and a member of Scholars for Palestine UK. Yeah, Rafeef, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Omar, for the kind introduction, and many thanks to all my colleagues who are here with me. Many of us have been organizing together for years. Some of us were founders of Israeli Apartheid Week decades ago. So for us, this is not new, and it's actually quite sad that we have to still be here having the same conversations while the levels of violence just increase. So I want to say to my colleagues, but all the Palestinians on the call, that it's a very, very tough time right now for all of us, and it's taking all our human energies and efforts to pull ourselves together and be talking about organizing in the short term and in the long term. But that is what it is to be Palestinian, is to unfortunately be surviving a genocide and planning what we can do to stop the next one. So I wanted to speak today a little bit about the organizing that has happened and the educational sector in particular. My colleague Mazen mentioned before the invasion of Lebanon in 1982, my family are double refugees, once from Palestine and once from Lebanon. And the one thing we were always told was education is the one thing they can't take from you. So make sure you get your education, because they can steal our land. They can make sure that we live in tents. They can even occupy these tents and throw you out of them and out of the refugee camps. And the one thing that you can have and hold on to is your education. And on this day of education, I think the case that my colleague Mazen made about the consistent destruction and aim at Palestinian education is part and parcel of the settler colonial project. It's not simply the destruction of schools or universities or buildings. It's an aim at the cultural heritage of the Palestinian people. It's an aim at us as a collective entity that has refused and resisted this denial of our very existence. And education has always been one of our roots to that. So this targeting of the educational sector is part and parcel of the project, but I also want to stress that oftentimes when people speak about solidarity with Palestinians, it's as if we are objects of solidarity rather than active agents that have built infrastructures and education under extremely difficult circumstances. And very often, although we speak about education, there's hardly mention of workers in this sector. So allow me a few minutes to discuss that. As my colleagues have said, decades of Israeli settler colonialism and occupation have severely undermined Palestinian access to education and the quality of the infrastructure that we have. Schools and universities are frequently targeted by military attacks. Teachers and students are subject to arrest and detention. There's movement restrictions, as Samia has mentioned, which make it impossible sometimes for students to even get to universities, harassment at military checkpoints. In Area C, which covers 60% of the West Bank, more than 1/3 36% of residential areas lack primary schools due to the Israeli restrictions on planning and construction. In East Jerusalem, which is also under Israeli control, municipal schools require more than 2,000 extra classrooms. 52 Palestinian schools were under formal threat of demolition, and this is back in December 2020, 44 in Area C and 8 in East Jerusalem. In the Gaza Strip, successive Israeli military bombardments and a 17-year siege have hindered the building of new schools. There's massive overcrowding, and already schools were running 2 and 3 shifts before October 7th, because history did not begin on October 7th. So in the context of these ongoing attacks and restrictions on movement, it has actually been nothing short of remarkable that Palestinians continue to build infrastructures of education and continue to get education. I have to stress here that the educational sector, if we take it as a whole and we look at nursery teachers, elementary teachers, is also very much a female sector. The majority of the sector are women educators, especially if we include nursery and elementary. It is also an undervalued sector at most times in terms of the pay. And within this sector, there's very high levels of unionization. Besides the health sector, it actually has the highest levels of unionization in Palestine. Workers in the education sector are highly organized. They have undertaken several strikes in the past few years. Alongside the General Union of Palestinian Teachers, which is an affiliate of the PGFTU, teachers have organized independent committees, local committees, and they have been a leading source of militancy in the sector, demanding their rights. And again, I stress, this is a highly female labor force. In universities, local staff unions are very well established and have successfully improved conditions in different workplaces. The local university unions are organized collectively within the Federation of Unions of Palestinian Universities Professors and Employees. And although those acronyms tend to be long, and we Palestinians love our long acronyms, one thing I will say is that when we ask people here, usually people don't even know what the unions are that are doing this organizing on the ground in Palestine. So part of why Scholars for Palestine was established was to highlight the Palestinian educational sector, not just to highlight the damage that is occurring, but to highlight the workers in this sector, the incredible work that they do day in and day out, but also the organizing that they do. So it's not simply that Palestinians are objects of solidarity. We are agents and workers that are building an educational sector that out of decades of settler colonialism and occupation has emerged to be very strong, very dynamic. Some of the most interesting writing, I would say, is coming out of the universities in Palestine, especially writing about settler colonialism as the context would dictate. So with that in mind, we need to, in this moment, start to reorient our solidarity, if we are in universities in the West, to actually be anti-racist solidarity that centers the voices of Palestinian educators and the work that they do. This means that there cannot be solidarity that ignores Palestinians on the ground that are doing and surviving this work. But it also means making relationships and partnerships with Palestinian universities, ensuring that those are equitable relationships, not extractivist ones. I say this because in the context of UK academia, we are constantly told about building partnerships, and it's never actually about relations of solidarity. So I think we have a moment here to show different ways of doing partnerships and different ways of building solidarity. As my colleagues have mentioned, even if the genocide were to stop tomorrow, Gaza has become uninhabitable in the way that it has been destroyed, and most of the universities are flattened to the ground. Most of the schools are flattened to the ground. There will be a lot of building to do. And this will require us to have exchanges. This will require us to build fellowships. This will require us to build union solidarity as well for the short and the long term. And again, the situation in Gaza right now is on our minds, but the attack on Palestinian universities is ongoing, whether it's in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. So I wanted to begin there because I know that many people on the call are involved in solidarity actions. But I think this reorientation, this thinking of how do we support the Palestinian educational sector rather than thinking of it as just this entity of buildings that get bombed, but actually thinking of people as workers who are carrying on this work. In terms of practicalities, I wanted to mention a few models that we have seen on university campuses right now that have worked and have pushed forward work that is evolving and that we need to think about and broaden. This is beyond an emergency. Some people talk about a catastrophe, and if you see the messages from people in Gaza today, the word Nakba is constantly being used because it is a Nakba, and the Nakba has been ongoing, but this is such a culmination, this moment. So there is a lot of work to be done, and the models we are trying, and all of us are trying our best in different ways. One thing that has worked on some campuses is establishing staff-student assemblies to do the solidarity work around Palestine. And this is when staff and students actually come together to do the organizing, to build the actions together. And I think these staff-student assemblies have been very important. One thing to do is to continue to pressurize the administrations to take a stand. Like in the United States, we haven't really had university administrations take a stand, regardless of the many letters that we have written asking them to make the most minimal of comments or statements, the way they all rushed to make comments about Ukraine, the way it was very normalized to support Ukraine. This has not happened in the Palestinian case. So pressure needs to stay on these administrators and these VCs to make sure that they do something. And they will ignore us. They have ignored us, but I think the pressure is building up, and the more organized we are, the more we can force things to happen. There have been many motions at different UCU branches. Some of them were slower to take place than others. I think a wave of motions needs to happen again for this current moment to make sure that the work that is built within UCU branches is consistent and isn't just a flash in the pan that happened at the beginning of the war and the genocide, but actually builds into ongoing conversations. And with that, one element of it is certainly support for Palestinian universities, particularly Palestinian universities in Gaza. But the other element of this is ending institutional complicity. And there's different forms of institutional complicity. There's, of course, complicity with the arms trade that many of our campuses unfortunately have. There's complicity with corporations that are supporting of the occupation. There are many academic partnerships. So on each campus, there is research to be done. So part of these motions that we need to be passing is to be doing this research and ensuring that we build the campaigns to end complicity on our campuses. The motions are there to support us and to ensure that rather than this work happening outside of the UCU structures, that we build it in for the long term in our UCU structures. There was a lot of pressure that was put on the UCU leadership early on about the USS pension fund, and there has been an attempt to work on the pension fund ending its complicity with companies that support the occupation. That's an ongoing conversation that we need to ensure continues to happen. Part of the ongoing work that needs to happen, unfortunately, and continues to be a struggle for all of us, is making and taking space on our campuses. I cannot begin to tell you the number of students that come into my office every day saying, why can't we have conversations about Palestine? There has been an atmosphere of fear created where to get the simplest event, there are risk assessment forms to fill that are pages long. But I think we need to continue to make and take the space. In that sense, the Accept Palestine series has been very important in ensuring that we have these events on campuses. We need to continue to support each other across university campuses to have these events, One thing that is easily doable is these risk assessment forms. Let's all share them with each other if we need to do them. But also, if the campuses are not allowing us to have events, let's have them on the streets. It cannot be that we are silent about Palestine in a situation of genocide because of a risk assessment form that is stalling the entire process. If we won't get the space, we need to take the space on the streets. We need to challenge this climate of fear. And even today, I got messages from colleagues saying they're very afraid of signing a statement because of what repercussions might happen. And I do respect that people are afraid. And I do respect that all of us are implicated differently. And I do respect that some of us have visas and others don't. But what else does the Israeli state have to do to Palestinians before that fear is broken? What are we waiting for before we take a stand? Seeing a televised genocide, if this doesn't break your fear, I'm not sure what will. And I'm not sure if you want to live in this fear for the rest of your life. And maybe that fear is just your conscience telling you that you need to do something now. Because students have taken the lead. They have done walkouts, they have done the organizing, and in many cases, it's the academics that are afraid. And fair enough, often students are the ones who lead these kinds of mobilizations. But I truly can no longer answer that question. And everyone who's telling me about their fear, I'd want you to answer that question for yourself. What is your threshold? What is your threshold to stop being afraid? Is it a number of bodies? Is it a number of buildings? Because that threshold has passed. And if we are worried and live in fear at this point, imagine what else can be happen while we are still in this fear. And I want to say that because as respectful as I want to be of where people are at, I think what we are seeing is really a turning point, not just for Palestine. It's a turning point for our relationships with our universities, wherever we are, that we either stay silenced on every issue or we actually speak up and take up these places again. The climate of fear on universities, the intimidation, the bureaucratization of everything hits a strong point when it comes to Palestine, but it's around every issue that we speak about. So if we're silent about this one, we will be silenced about everything else. And part of the reason why I'm advocating for the staff student assemblies is because I feel we need to be there strongly for our students, but the students are also pushing us, and these spaces are really important organizing spaces. I'll just end by saying that Scholars for Palestine has put forward a statement from Arab and Palestinian academics in the UK to urge us to take more action and to push up the pressure in this next period. People are saying they're getting tired. People are saying they've gone out on demonstrations and there's not much to do. We need to make sure the demonstrations stay strong, but this is also the moment to deepen our organizing, to support each other. So please do look at that call from Scholars for Palestine, follow the work. We will put forward a model motion that you can take to your union branch. We'll send this out after this event. And the idea is to continue building this work, not as charity, not because this is a humanitarian disaster that is far away and people need to give charity, but because Palestinians are today leading the anti-racist struggle around the world. And because the genocide has been so horrific that we have nothing left but to speak up. And this is the time to be doing it. Thank you.